It's time for Talking Pictures Trivia. A quick friendly reminder, opening a banana from the other side is a little easier, and you end up with a great handle.
Welcome to Talking Pictures Trivia, the podcast in which a group of geographically challenged friends explore movies through trivia as an excuse to keep our friendships alive. I'm one of these friends, and today's host, Nick, and with me is
Tom
And KJ.
For those joining us for the first time, we start off each episode with a movie quiz, as these pivotal questions will determine who earns today's trivia crown. In round one, each question is worth 1 point, and in round two, each question is worth 2 points. Then, once the fierce competition is over, we follow it up with our famous movie rant where anything goes. Tom, tell us about today's movie.
Today we're continuing our exploration of movies related to The Matrix by going back to 1982 in France. Right after the law of decentralization creates the administrative regions of France, Daniel Vigne's movie, The Return of Martin Guerre, is released. The Return of Martin Guerre was not in theaters in the USA, but if you did go to the theaters in May of 1982, you could watch any Rocky III, the one where he fights Mr. T, and of course, Conan the Barbarian. So what this film follows is an actual true story, an account of Martin Guerre, who went off to war in 16th century France, and he returned sometime between 8 and 10 years later and took up his life again until it was later revealed that this Martin Guerre was an imposter, and everybody in the town just sort of went along with it, including his wife. There was a famous trial in which a somewhat famous jurist who recorded the event, they interviewed Martin Guerre, and it was revealed that, in fact, yes, this was an imposter, and he was hanged for this. This episode was recorded for posterity and became the plot of this film, became the plot of a musical, became the plot of some plays. It's just a very little story in history that no one seems to know quite what to do with. And this film, I think, plays with that mystery in pretty lovely ways. KJ, if you only had one word to describe the return of Martin Guerre, what would it be?
Charming. Nick?
Doppelganger.
And my word would be imitation.
It's time for question one.
Who was the king of France at the beginning of this movie?
Locked in.
Locked in.
All right, KJ, what do you have?
I have Francis the First because I'm pretty sure in the last little bit of this movie, it says something about Francis the First, or maybe in the very beginning, there's a small little thing about Francis the First.
All right, Nick, what do you have?
I too have Francis the First because I have a strong recollection that he was very good friends with Leonardo da Vinci.
All right, that's points for everyone, and I appreciate Nick's knowledge of French history that he's
learned
brought
that
to our
for the
episode
show.
today. All right. So in fact, KJ, you are right. It is at the beginning of the movie in voiceover in which we learn that this is the X year of the reign of Francis I when this film begins. And I thought that was kind of a very interesting little voiceover opening. Typically, this movie has a bit of a feel of a fairy tale. However, unlike most fairy tales have this kind of like in the past, in a galaxy long ago, far away, that type of thing. There isn't specificity, right? Sort of a helpful vagueness to fairy tales. That's not the case here. We get a very specific time and place. And I was wondering what you guys thought of that effect.
The other thing I really like that they say in the intro is, if you're looking for adventure, if you're looking for excitement, this isn't it, or something. Like they're right off the bat setting the stage. This is, what was the word you used, Tom? This is a curio.
Mhm.
This isn't some grand medieval production. We're going to be telling this strange little story.
Mhm.
Well, that's what I thought was interesting in our first impressions. We were talking about the plot, and what's really curious about this is that there really isn't much. Like, we just have a premise, yet somehow I will say it does still work. It kept me engaged, and I think that it would for most audiences. So it's that's tough to do when you just have a thought and say, I'm going to wrap everything else around. Is he who he says he is? And that's going to carry a full feature length film.
Yeah, it's a mystery movie, right? Who is this guy who he says he is? And they're played by different actors, so there's
there's a third
sense.
actor, right? Because young Martin's different than both.
Yeah, than
Martins.
both other Martins. Yeah, exactly. So there's 3 quote unquote Martins. So presumably he could be the guy, right? He could be actual Martin. But I think that mystery is what keeps it going, despite the fact that it's a very small film. Even in location, they don't go anywhere. Like, Martin at the end gets hanged, or quote unquote Martin gets hanged in front of his house. They don't even they don't even really get too far from the village to take care of their affairs. But I do like how it is situated in reality, right? I think that's what you're saying. Like, it's like this small movie that kept me engaged, or at least engaged. I don't know, really engaged, but it kept me engaged. And I think part of that is that the movie really is drawing from the sources, right? The original account of the trial, including all the characters. There were actually real people and whatnot, and it feels real. It feels kind of dirty and gritty and to the earth. And that also made it very compelling, and it also made the effect very non-fairy tale like. It had a different feel than that.
I'd really like to make a habit of demaking movies into silent films. And it would be really fun to make this one feel and look like Passion of the Joan of Arc. A lot of zoom ins on fake Martin's face. That could be.
Yeah.
No, it's fake Martin.
It's like, I knew that it wasn't him when all the intertitles said fake Martin.
Really? Did they?
No, I'm joking. I'm just picturing KJ making that version. I am Martin, says fake Martin.
Another thing about Francis, not that this was mentioned in the movie, but I think it is important to note that he was the guy who really worked hard to try and bring the Renaissance to France. The reason why we have the Mona Lisa in France is because of Francis Francois the First. He brought that painting, as well as Da Vinci, to his country.
Well, think about where they started in this film before this Renaissance period. They're literally comparing whose X is whose. Like, that's how you make an X. The fact that like literacy is extremely low here, and they couldn't even believe that the wife would even be able to write period. So I did enjoy that when they were saying that's how she marks things, and it's just a version of an X.
Yeah, and her way of getting, her kind of proving her point, like how proud she is that she can write her name, was
the only one in the town, really. So that is an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Her and Good Martin. So would you guys say Good Martin is a Renaissance man?
What do you mean by that?
Maybe on a micro level, he is inspiration and ideas brought to this otherwise sleepy and routine village.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because he's not a thinker, right? He's got a great intellect.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. He does have some kind of gifted ability for recall.
Yeah, he has as they say, as Jean says, he has a prodigious memory, and he knows this, and he also can read and write, which is something no one else in the town can do. So he does have intellect. He has intellectual capacity. We don't really see him having intellectual curiosity, though, right? Which you imagine is what kind of a Renaissance man or woman, I guess it's just Renaissance man in this age, would really have.
He's not really a jack of all trades. He's just gifted in one area to survive.
Yeah, and it's also his access to resources is very limited. You get the impression that the reason why he came here in part is because he could get away with it, but also in part there was financial gain to be had, and his love for his wife was sort of possibly an accident. I think it's sincere, but it doesn't seem like he planned on that. In terms of him being a Renaissance man and sort of like in the sense of sort of marking the beginning of something modern that's happening, I think there's maybe more there, in the sense that we have a person who's kind of replicating nature, right? Like there's a real person in the world named Martin, and this guy comes in and is able to replicate it and perform that. That kind of idea of performance in a non-religious context, that's kind of new in the Renaissance. And now granted, Martin isn't an actor, right? He's, a fake Martin isn't an actor. He's, just some guy, but there is this kind of tour de force performance going on. And that really is kind of a Renaissance thing.
It's time for question 2.
Now I lied. Question number 2 is actually worth 2 points.
What?
There are two things to remember. You get a point per thing.
Oh, fancy.
Okay, fancy indeed.
Actually, I lied. I lied in the instructions or the overview.
You did.
It's not my fault. Tom breaks the rules.
You fake Nick.
I'm the real Nick.
What are the? We'll see. Let's see how you do. What are the 2 things that Martin has forgotten, quote unquote, forgotten on his first day back home?
I might have them written in the show notes because I thought this might be coming. And there are exactly 2 locked in.
I may have read KJ's notes in the show notes. So,
luckily, there's a question mark because I couldn't remember one of them exactly.
Well, I wasn't going to say the name, but I'm also locked in.
All right. So we know Nick reads KJ's notes, but not mine.
Your notes are giant.
Which I want to write specifically for Nick.
To be fair, this time I actually did skim through your notes because there was some interesting banter between you and KJ.
Yeah, well, Tom, your responses to my comments are more than all the other notes combined.
Oh, are they? I was having a good time. Yeah.
Well, my notes are nonsensical, and I was just changing the lyrics of a rock song.
Oh, that's what that was.
Yes. Marty doesn't know. Anyway, let's move on.
All right. So, KJ.
All right, the 2 things that I had.
Oh, wait. It's me.
Yeah,
I think Nick I got to go first.
Okay. Yeah.
So he didn't know one of the friends, and he didn't know where the candles were.
Mm-hmm. And KJ, what do you have?
The same. The one friend. The one friend, and then the candles were kind of funny because he tries to convince them that they used to be in that drawer.
Mm-hmm. And they never were.
Whoa.
They're where they always were.
Yeah. And I was like, your charm works pretty well, but man, like, you're not gonna win them over on where the candles were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never moved the candles for. And that is correct. Very
Thank
good.
You, KJ.
Very good. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I'm the real Nick.
Yeah. KJ is the real Nick. So I brought this question up really to discuss, and we've done this a little bit already, but to discuss the movie's premise, and more specifically, Martin's role, new Martin, fake Martin's role in the community. And what you guys thought of how he worked in this town, maybe compared to original Martin?
I like to think of them as good Martin and undesirable Martin.
That seems more confusing.
Well, hopefully we don't have to reference undesirable Martin too much. But so good Martin was pretty great. But I was thinking,
he good or great?
He was all around an improvement. It's like when Dwayne Johnson's in a movie. The movie just gets better because Dwayne Johnson's there. The town got better because good Martin was there. Everything about it was better.
And I think you see with when Jean de Coët, the judge, at the end, he goes to the uncle who's really responsible for fake Martin's death, right? He's eventually the one whose actions lead to the trial and then the second trial. And he tells him at the end, like, go back and keep order in the village since you caused this problem, right? Since you brought this to our attention. And there's kind of a recognition that, yeah, he's not the real guy and he's violating these kind of code of ethics. However, he was what this town needed, not the other one. And the other one didn't want to be there. He came back out of maybe obligation. It's not even entirely clear why he came back, but I think you're right. I think it's like he makes this town better. And if he came there to get money from the farm, possibly, but he clearly was not looking to leave, and he was apparently a very good husband to Bernadette.
I'm positive that if he never went to the uncle and asked for his share, this never would have happened. They would have just been fine with him being Martin, and it wouldn't have been a very good movie or story, but he would have just joined their community. It was the fact that suspicions began when there was financial gains to be had.
And it's, if you remember, when initially the two gamblers present the evidence that he's with a Pensée, I think is like the kind of clown name for him.
Sounds right.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's the uncle who tells everyone he's Martin. We know Martin. Let's not listen to these outsiders say things. And you're right, Nick. As soon as Martin tries to get the money, it all goes to hell.
I was also thinking, if this was made in 82, if this was a more modern movie, or even I think it might work as an HBO TV series or something. I think when he first comes to town, there would have been a lot more gray if he understood what was going on. It doesn't really matter for the movie, but how was he able to know everybody's name that first day? Did Undesirable Martin like paint everybody so that he could know what they looked like? That the suspension of disbelief there is a bit broken.
I believe he's very good with context clues and positioning, and he even says it that the parts that he didn't know, everyone else filled in the gaps. So some of the way he talks, it actually allows them to give him information. I just think he was gifted in that manner, in memory and manipulation.
And I think in a more modern movie, they would have shown that. But so I'd watched this when so Tom had suggested this for the leading up to the Matrix a while back, earlier this year. And Tom and I had watched it then, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, this might work. And then I watched it again more recently for this episode. And when you know what's happening and you're watching, there's no context clues. He's not playing those tricks on the first two cousins. I forget exactly. He gets it wrong, but in a very charming way. Like he just mixed up the brother. But how many people are in that town?
I don't know
30.
how many.
Yeah,
it's not a dramatic number of people, but enough that he could probably place people based on age and how they work with him. But I've only seen it the one watch, so definitely you might have more insight on that by trying to figure all those missing beats.
You guys ever do like photography for a wedding?
Have I ever
Nope.
done
like shot a wedding?
No.
One of the things we try to do is get the list of all the people for the family photos. And even if I had a month, there's no way I'd be able to predict who was Uncle Joe and cousin Barry or whatever it is. So that was the one area I think this movie could have used an improvement.
That's because you're no Arnaud Detil.
That's true. I'm not good, Nick.
This is one thing that the effect of that makes it more fairy tale-ish. And there tends to be, I think, this dance in this movie where I said in my initial thoughts here that we have a very specific time frame, which kind of takes away from the fairy tale thing. However, when Gerard Depardieu's Martin comes on, he's so charismatic, and he's so brilliant that it kind of introduces a bit of the fantastical, I think, into this kind of realist, this real world. And I think that actually kind of also speaks to this kind of Renaissance thing you mentioned, KJ. Like there's this new type of thing that's going to happen now, and it seems to be this kind of smash of new possibility into what used to be the humdrum of the medieval. And at the end of round one, we have a tie. See you after this break.
Tom here, and I take my lunch to work every day. However, I often cannot find room for my knives, forks, chopsticks, spoons, and tongs. So I just leave a giant pile of dirty silverware on my desk, to the horror of my coworkers and the custodial services. But I don't have room in my tiny bag for so many enormous pieces of silverware. That's why I now own Tiny Utensils. Tiny Utensils is a full silverware set that fits in your pocket. Hopefully you don't have a hole in that pocket, otherwise your Tiny Utensil silverware set may be lost. That's how small they are. And the variety is great. You can fit a 20-piece Chef Pro Plus right in your wallet. Or pick up the stainless steel gourmet set, including 50 pieces that together are roughly the size of an ear pod. You get the idea. I may not have cleaned the pile of rusty silverware turned shrapnel from off my desk, but thanks to Tiny Utensils, I could. Tiny Utensils. Where the are they?
And we're back. This is Good Nick, as opposed to the guy that usually brings us back. And
Great
we don't
Nick.
have Great Nick. That's his alternate handle on Twitter, by the way. It's at Great Nick at Twitter.
I have no idea who that is. It is not me, just in case.
And normally we ask the guest a quote unquote critical question at this point. We have no guest, so I thought I'd turn to you guys. Nick, if you could watch this movie with anyone, dead, alive, fiction, nonfiction, who would it be?
I've already answered this one in prior questions here. So since this is during the reign of Francis I or Francois, I would like to see what his buddy Leonardo da Vinci would think about this, because it's kind of happening during that time frame. He might have some unique insights. And for someone of that era, he had some crazy inventions and ideas. I think he actually could understand what's going on in this crazy media.
So was Leonardo da Vinci French?
No,
they
he's
just were
Italian.
friends.
Yeah,
They were
okay.
just friends.
He's from Vinci. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Leonardo da Vinci kind of
Vinci.
Yeah, he starts to move up. I think he's poached at this point from Milan. He used to work for the Sforza family, which were like they were like the de Medici of Milan. And then Francois brings him in, and Da Vinci ends up actually dying in Francois's arms in France.
That's kind of sad. You think anybody ever went back to Milan and said, "I'm Da Vinci"? And they're like, "Prove it! Roll this ball down a hill."
Yeah.
No, they would just have him like do a painting, KJ, and he
Or
drew like stick figures.
Da Vinci had so many projects he didn't finish that they're probably like, "Great, get back to the horses. You're going to design a bunch of horses. Here you go.
What
Finish
about
up."
that helicopter?
How come
Yeah.
we're not flying?
Yeah, I think it'd be that. I think the fake Da Vinci would quickly exit just because he had so much work.
Too much pressure.
Dead guy left for him.
But to keep drawing parallels, his wife would be happy.
Did Da Vinci? I don't think Da Vinci was married.
I don't know.
I don't think he.
I'll ask him when we watch the movie.
I don't think
This
he.
is Da
I
Vinci.
don't think he had a wife, and he did have a very young male
Companion.
Oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So
I
maybe
think what
they would
we
be
should,
excited, maybe.
yeah, I mean
Well,
we're
if I had
talking
two people I
very
could watch
young.
the movie with.
It would be Mr. Da Vinci and Mr. Da Vinci.
Yeah, I was better than mine. Mine was going to be Catherine de Medici, just because she would deserve it, but it's less funny.
Well,
I don't know. Funny
Nobody
is
did-
very subjective.
Yeah, Catherine de Medici is the she would later kind of take over France. She's like three rulers later, and her son was Charles the Ninth, and that was when you started the War of the Religions.
oh,
You had a
Tom,
lot
that
of-
was hilarious right there. I mean, that's we so should have used that.
you're killing it. The
Yeah.
War of the Religions.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my answer was going to be somebody that could well time "Sacre bleu" throughout the whole movie. All right, should we move on to question 3?
I think we should wrap it up when we're on a high note here.
Yeah.
I'd like to once again.
We tied.
Congratulate both of us. Yeah.
And the most
For just
humble way
reading our
possible.
show notes and prior
I wanna thank
discussions.
Good Nick and great Nick on winning this episode.
Flawless victory.
Congratulations, Nick. You won twice. It's time for question 3.
What one physical clue exists that says Martin is not who he says he is?
Locked in.
Locked in.
All right, KJ, you're going first.
The wooden device that the cobbler had was the one piece or the one physical clue.
All right, Nick, what do you have?
Yes, apparently the cobbler has a wooden model of everyone's foot in the village, and it didn't add up to the correct shoe size.
Okay, very good. Points all around. Yay.
Flawless so far.
Flawless victory. All right. So I brought this up to talk about the new Martin and what he can change. Right? We've talked about Martin as new Martin as the ideal Martin, the better version of Martin. However, there is still a reality he can't break with. Right? There's still a pastness that he can't deceive or change. And a lot of this movie is kind of about that. It's about the inescapable way, the inescapable world he can't flee from, right? And I was wondering what you guys thought of the village that ends up outing him.
Wait a minute. Can we make a connection here between old Neo and new Neo?
New Neo.
I think we can make
I think we
thank you.
can.
Yeah, I think we can make a connection also between different worlds, right? And this idea of like there was another world, and that's sort of kind of still in charge or still governing things. But what, Nick, I'm sorry I cut you off. What is your old new Neo thing?
Yeah, so where my mind went there is the old Neo before he takes the blue pill, right? Is
The red pill.
The red pill. Don't take the blue pill. Take the red pill.
It's the most common trope online.
Unless it's Cypher. Unless it's Cypher.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Cypher. Okay. So before he does that, he's kind of like doesn't have a good life. He's just sitting in his house. He's just drifting through life, just like the old, or who we find out is the real Martin, is still just drifting through life doing nothing. Whereas the new Martin and the new Neo are making significant contributions to all of those around them. So that's where I was going with that.
Mhm.
We need to add the scene where Bernadette talks to the Oracle. So she knows that undesirable Martin is not the one because she wasn't really in love with him.
Mhm.
But she knows good Martin.
Yeah, I think there is something to that. Matrix, I think the religious imagery is more direct on. So you have Neo, the Redeemer, but it's also I think you're right, Nick, that Neo is also something new, right? He's there to revitalize society or fix society in some way. Martin doesn't have as grand a role, obviously, but he is kind of an improvement upon things. I think with this and the Matrix also parallel is in the fact that that there is a distinct reality, like a real world that you can't get away from, right? There's that getting away from it is delusional, right? It's not, there isn't transcendence or anything like that. There's only the delusion. That's what gets you from there. And there is this sort of productive delusion that's going on in the village, right? They're all sort of, I'm sorry, he doesn't really look like the Martin who left. They're kind of playing it up a little bit because I think it's convenient. They just like him more. He's more charismatic until it isn't anymore. But I think in both cases, I think in The Matrix and in this, the reason why this isn't a fairy tale and why The Matrix isn't maybe a fantasy, though that's a complicated thing to say, is that there's still this like home world. There's still this real that the artificial, be it the artificial in our mind or the artificial that's in a computer or something like that, is tied to. And I think in that way, in our Matrix 4 series, I think this movie is actually closer to the Matrix in terms of themes than World on a Wire, where I think a lot of World on a Wire is like, we're not really sure what reality is. Reality might actually be less quote unquote real than the simulacrum machine that they're in. And so I think these two movies are, in spite of the fact that this movie's not science fiction and World on a Wire has kind of this very similar plot as The Matrix, I think thematically these two movies are closer together.
Well, and Good Martin was in this village for a while, right? He has a kid. The kid grows up enough that you can carry the kid around.
It's
The kid
at
can
least
walk,
18 months,
right?
Mhm.
It's that's a long time to be living somewhere. And similar to The Matrix, Good Martin gives at least the wife hope, right?
Mhm.
Her life before Good Martin comes back is
Bleak.
Mhm.
bleak, exactly, like
Mhm.
Rams. And I think you're quite right. Stiller doesn't bring hope to anybody. That's not his role in World on a Wire.
Yeah.
So there are certainly thematic similarities between the Return of Martin and the Matrix.
Yeah, and I think there's redemption in this movie. Even there's the possibility of redemption. It doesn't happen because fake Martin gets executed. But with Neo, certainly there's the possibility of redemption. He's the redeemer, right? He's going to free everybody from this thing. And World on a Wire is there's sort of a postmodern ennui that's going on in World of a Wire. There isn't a sense at the end of that movie that anybody's been emancipated. I mean, we know in the plot there has been, but it's not exactly a beautiful, lush kind of ending. The real world seems as contained and as cloying as the fake one.
Whereas Good Martin World ends, and the village goes back to uninspired village, right? Unless she teaches people how to write her name, writing's kind of done.
Well, we don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe he has a lasting legacy and it did improve as we lead into the Renaissance.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of hard to imagine what that it's kind of hard to imagine what that legacy is. And I do have a comment about that might interfere with the next question. So I'm gonna.
So let's move on.
Oh, I guess that's the cue. All right, gentlemen, here we are at question 4, and we have a tie at 5 points apiece. And so here, question 4, our most challenging question, our final question, worth 2 points to break the tie.
It's time for question 4.
What happened to Jean Dicroix 12 years after the events of this movie? Do you remember who Jean is?
No, I do not.
The judge from the Toulouse Parliament.
Actually, that was going to be my guess that's who that was, but I know that's not the answer to the question. That's just who the question's about.
Locked in with what I think is going to be a pretty good joke answer and then a real one.
Okay. So KJ double lock.
I'm going to have to lock in. I don't know. I
Nick?
think he becomes the head judge for the country.
All right. And KJ, what do you have?
History repeats itself. He went back and said, "I'm Martin." Back to the village. He knew everybody from the trial. He also knew how the trial was going to go, so he knew how to play the law if the uncle tried. I think he died for being Protestant.
All right, and KJ gets the points.
Oh
and
no,
the
KJ
game.
told me that before this episode.
Yeah.
And Tom told me that before.
This is set up.
Well, it's
Was
also
that in the context of the film?
No, well,
they mentioned it in the movie. Yeah,
actually, yeah. And so for the audience that can't see this Google Docs, there are a lot of notes in Tom's section, a lot. And one of the notes says, "I think you know where I'm going with this." And my comment back is, "No, I don't." And then it goes on. And I forget exactly where it is. I can't even find it in here. But the reason I knew the answer to this one is I was looking for it because I wanted to know if it was in the movie or not. It's in the very last outro, right, Tom? This is the
I literally
end
read this
cap.
before in his notes, and I totally forgot.
Yeah, it says in the outro that Jean de Croix, he was killed 12 years later in the Saint Bartholomew Day massacre for his Protestant beliefs. So it is in text. It's in the movie.
That was just sloppy on my end. It was literally on the nose. But
right.
Congratulations, KJ.
Congratulations,
Thanks.
Vinny. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Good, Nick.
And so there's a little bit kind of good. Yeah, good Nick won. Congratulations, Nick. But so this kind of leads into the past commentary we were having, just because when we look to the future, we know that the cycle that continues isn't humanistic. It's not writing, it's burning. It's the hanging, right? And if people don't know what the St. Bart's Day massacre was basically the Catholic French went door to door and murdered Protestants, murdered the Huguenots of France, which apparently Jean had converted to Protestantism by that point and was tried by the same parliament that he used to sit on, by the Toulouse Parliament. Eventually, these kind of these war of religions claim about 2 million lives.
Wow.
Even though the St. Bart's Day massacre is thousands of people. But anyway.
I like we're ending on a high note, a positive note.
Well, this is, who instituted it was Catherine de Medici, which is why she was the woman I was going to watch this movie with as kind of a punishment to her. But anyway, so there is this. So I found this ending very interesting, that it ends on that note. First of all, it's real. I mean, Jean was the person who recorded this. This is what actually happened to him. However, it is a really odd note to end this movie on. And it makes me think the future is not to be seen optimistically, but as potentially dangerous. And I was wondering what you guys thought of this very odd ending.
Well, do you think he really showed up on the day of the trial just as they were about to announce that the other guy was Martin?
Yeah, apparently, yes.
But
Wow.
That's in the record.
That actually sounds more like a fairy tale.
Yeah, I mean, according to the official records, which I actually looked up, yeah, he came.
Where are they in the show notes here, Tom? I don't see.
I didn't cut and paste them. Apparently he showed up. He had one leg. He had a whole story about where he had been. Neither of his sisters recognized him though. They still thought the fake Martin was that Martin. But yeah, no, that actually happened. Like he came in according to Jean's record. That's what happened.
Well, so I wonder if that ending is the other side of a boundary, right? I love these boundaries. And if this is a fairy tale, maybe we get into fairy not when good Martin shows up, but right at the beginning when the intro that you had pointed out earlier, Tom, tells us where in a tale, and maybe they didn't want to leave us there, so they had to bring us back to reality by pointing out something very real and factual.
But it also opens, the voiceover is like a fact machine, right? At the beginning, it gives us the facts. It's this year of Francois' reign, right? And in this place, it gives us time and place. And it ends on this other kind of factoid, which gives us a historical event and situates the tale of Martin within that historical event. So it seems odd to introduce the fantasy via historical realities, right? Marks of historical reality. And that's where I find like, I find it less fantastical in the sense of a fantasy story. However, I do think it's this liminal space that you're talking about, KJ. I do think it's there. I think it's this place between this kind of medieval, more feudal thing and the modern. That's why I think like the Renaissance is important, why Francois is important to be mentioned. But it's also the kind of the catastrophes of the modern, which I think is why it's important to recognize or mention at the end, the kind of the death of the Huguenots, right? This sort of this sort of catastrophe that really begins at the beginning of the Renaissance. And the other term for the Renaissance that everybody uses, they don't really say Renaissance anymore, it's sort of an outdated term, is early modern period, right? And what we're witnessing in France at this time is the beginning of modernity.
Drink.
Oh, we I do say modernity a lot, right?
Turns out it's invading often.
I think it's just a common theme of your movie picks, where there's someone, some small area that is being invaded by modernity.
Yeah. I think it's the kind of, it's odd because we have had these. I think actually a lot of them come from UKJ. These kind of like little conservative movies, and these little conservative movies, and I don't mean politically conservative. They're not like voting Republican or something, but they're these movies that are about these kind of traditional orders that have to deal with this new way of life. That's the invading, Rams is like that, certainly. And I think this movie kind of falls into that pattern as well, but in a different way. I'm not entirely sure, and that's why I asked this question. I was interested in what you guys really thought of that framing device, which I found fascinating.
So maybe another take would be the movie makers were nervous that nobody would believe in this story. So they're trying to be like, no, citation, here it is. Like, here's another historical thing that happened just like this did. Right? Because Passion of the Joan of Arc kind of does that too. Don't they frame it with these are lifted directly from...
Yes. Yeah, that's right. And they show the original trial records that were kept there. So there is this thing. But then Passion of Joan of Arc does something really weird, which is it goes like these kind of odd expressionistic full-on angles. And it's Passion of Joan of Arc also had an incredibly expensive and realistic set that you almost can't see at all in the movie. And so there's this weird, here's another, boundary thing, right? With Passion of Joan of Arc, there's this like incredibly expressive camera work, and there's this realistic stuff that you can't see, or you can only see parts of. So that's a weird blend. Here, it seems like really invested in the realism. There doesn't seem to be anything particularly fantastical that happens, and the camera work is mostly straight, boring. Yeah,
standard.
Yeah, the costumes are great, but you know,
I would say the only thing fantastical was his recall, his ability to take these little nuggets and read people and play off that he's a whole nother person when he's never seen any of these people before. That was the only thing that was a stretch. And I didn't have the same second watch that KJ did, but I'm sure I'd have more questions on that part if I was really looking at every interaction.
Yeah, possibly. But there's also that point in the trial where when he comes clean, he says, "There's no magic in it." Right. That's what he looks. He goes, "That's what."
Well, they thought he was a witch or something.
Yeah, they thought it was a demon and that type of thing. He's like, "No, there's no magic in it. I swear."
But I like how he flipped at the end. He's almost like, "You got me." It's like to the bitter end. He's like, "I'm like, yep."
Yeah, And it's why did he do that? Right? Do you remember what the justification she gives his wife?
To save her and his kid.
Yeah, this really, in a lot of ways, is her movie, right? It's a
Mhm.
story about her dealing with stuff with different Martins.
Yeah, and it's based on a book called The Wife of Martin Guerre. So the book, it's a novelization of an actual event, and the novelization is from her perspective. So yeah, and so is the movie. We start the story with her testimony at the initial trial to Jean. So the framing device is kind of doubled. There's the voiceover that gives us this background, but then there's her who gives us this the life of the village. And we haven't talked about her a lot. What were you guys' thoughts on her?
She literally is the key to the cover story because they literally say she knows things only a wife would know. And that's pretty compelling to an audience, especially in those times, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, she also, it seems like she knew, right? We got
She
at the
did.
end. Yeah,
Yeah,
at the
no,
end,
they're
she kind of
literally saying,
admits.
yeah.
She talks with Jean, and that's when you get that kind of, Martin didn't need me, he did. We were good together. That's what she said. Yeah, we were
She
good
knew
together.
all along. I think that from the first night, she knew
Yeah.
it wasn't, but she liked what she saw. And her
Yeah.
other husband,
Mm.
well, her true husband, just completely abandoned her.
Mhm.
And she was with no one else for all that time, lonely. And this somewhat, well, I'd say handsome and charming guy came in and he says he's her husband. She's like, hey, that sounds good to me.
Yeah. And old Martin was lazy. He was like really socially inept.
He was literally impotent. They literally go into that, how he has challenges with affection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which they eventually fixed by whipping him, which there's a lot we could say there. Yeah, so yeah, it is her movie. I think that's right. That's from the source material as well. And it's her tale to tell. And I they are really good together. They're a sweet couple, and he's good for her. And this idea of his identity, right? That this identity is kind of constructed by the needs of the community. He's Martin because the community needs a Martin. She needs a Martin, and he's a really good Martin. Just like KJ, you're a better Nick than the Nick we originally had.
I would say
Debatable.
better. Yeah, good and
Yeah, we
and
call them
great,
good
yeah.
Nick, not
Yeah,
better Nick.
great, yeah.
Listen, I already
Well,
lost the episode gracefully.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. You're victorious, Nick. That's what.
This week, I guess so. As
Yeah.
long as Nick's in the title, I'll take it.
That's similar to Neo, right? Neo is who that community needed. They needed the one. They needed somebody to break them out or give them hope that they could break out of this. So there's another Matrixy reference as well.
It's time for Movie Rent.
So another comparison to the Matrix. In the Matrix, there's the trench coats and there's those sunglasses, right? Everybody's got those cool sunglasses. In the Return of Martin, everybody's got those cool caps.
Cool is debatable. I knew you were going to go there with that cap. Not a good look.
Did they get an Oscar nomination for costumes? They have one Oscar nomination. I think it might have been for costumes.
And it's probably because of the hats. And so on the second watch, I was following Martin's hat to see if there's any symbolism there. And this is a bit of a stretch. But when he first gets there, it's clean, pristine. It's good. Eventually, it starts getting dirtier as he starts making a little bit of mistakes. And then it gets knocked off his head when he goes up to the top of the barn to try to get the money. But it's turned out to be fake. Just like Agent Smith's sunglasses, which gets knocked off at some point in the movie.
I think
Maybe
that's exactly
twice.
what the Wachowskis were getting at.
They were
Nailed
recreating.
it.
Yes. We now have a promo for our show, which is edited. Yeah, I don't know about that. So the reason why I brought this, so my complaint with the Matrix, and I think I voiced that 2 weeks ago, was that what the sisters that film are trying to do, they're failing to do. What they're trying to do is present the hyperreal, right? This kind of Baudrillardian world in which the thing that's represented is no longer, the representation no longer has a thing that it's derived from, right? And so if you think of sign, right, the term sign has a signifier and signified. Put them together, you have a sign. And you could think of like tree, right? Tree, the word, green thing with leaves, signified, signifier. The sign is the word identifying the object. Does that make sense so far?
Nope.
Yes.
Yep. It's a word. When you say a word, it means something in the world.
That's the sign.
The sign is that meaning system.
The word is the signifier.
And what
the tree is the signified.
Yeah. Well, what happens with the Matrix is what they're going for in the Matrix is what Baudrillard is saying with the hyperreal, which is the sign is broken, all signifieds, no signifiers, right? But so there is only these symbols. They don't connect to anything anymore. They never did. Now in the Matrix, that's kind of a problem because actually it does, right? There is a real world. It's very distinct what the real world is. The fake world is based on aspects of the real world. It kind of doesn't work. I think it works better.
But it looks so cool.
It's a cool looking movie. The special effects are great. But I think the project that the sisters were going for in that film doesn't work because the borders are very, very clear. What's real, what isn't real. Right. And even the world of the Matrix is clearly based on 1998, whatever, America, you know.
The peak of our civilization.
The peak of our civilization, 1998, when Will Smith was topping the charts. That's they decided to shut it down after that. What Baudrillard says is that thing, that kind of hyper reality, that is the last step on a series of kind of steps. The first one being in the Renaissance. And what we see in the Renaissance is this trompe-l'oeil, trompe-l'oeil, the kind of artwork where it's a painting, but you look at it, it looks like a full dimensional building. That is, it's a type of art, but the idea being that it's something fake, but recognizes and represents something in the real world. And
so the painting's the signifier.
Yeah, then it's signified. It's signifying a real room, right? But there's something there in nature that's real, and the Renaissance is the replication of the natural world. You know what I'm saying?
I hear you, Tom. I don't see where you're going.
Okay, so what happens with I think Martin is the beginning of representation, right? Where this idea of the counterfeit, of something as faking something else, as representing something else, but isn't the real thing, isn't the original, but looks to the original for its references, for its design, for its function, right? All of those things. It's representing that. Think of an actor, right? This is early modern periods when acting really becomes a thing. Theater becomes secularized and an independent thing. It's representing the real world and purporting to point to something in the world that it represents. But it's counterfeiting. It's not the real world. And Martin, I think, is that. Right. I think Martin is that. And I think the idea the sisters had with the Matrix is that's going to be a world of fake Martins without real Martins. Right.
We should have called him counterfeit Martin.
Yeah, exactly. He's counterfeit Martin. He's counterfeit Martin.
That is a really good name for
Martin. Yeah, he's counterfeit.
Okay, we got to redub the whole episode, change every instance of
counterfeit. Counterfeit. But Tom, who's counterfeit in the Matrix?
That's the thing. I think there is, right? And I think that's the problem with the movie. It isn't supposed to be counterfeit, but it is. And it's
who is? There's a every avatar has a real person back in.
Right. But that's the thing, right? It ends up being the original person or the flesh and blood person, and then this version of them that's drawn from them. Neo in the Matrix or Thomas Anderson in the Matrix, and
is the
Neo,
signifier. Neo's the signifiee.
Signified. Yeah.
Signified.
Yeah. And so what you have is each individual is a sign unto themselves, because there is in the Matrix this representation that is based upon this natural biological body.
Where you're saying good Martin is not an avatar for
No,
undesirable Martin.
I'm saying it's very similar.
Oh.
I'm saying that's the comparison. I think the sisters wouldn't say that, but I think that they're kind of misreading their own movie. And I think that's why these two movies are very, very similar. Even more so than World on a Wire, despite the science fiction premise of that picture.
Whoa.
I was going to bring that up, though. World on a Wire is more authentic in the sense that all of those beings are not linked to something else. They are their own thing. They are completely computerized AI or not simulations. They're their own beings.
Yeah.
Via computer code.
Yeah. And that's an interesting take on it, right? To go like, they are more authentic than the flesh and blood counterfeit Martin, right?
That's why I wanted to leave on that note. I mean, I just wanted to drop
that's
that bomb.
Yeah.
That's an interesting note.
So I guess we'll see what happens in the fourth Matrix movie next week.
Yeah, maybe. That'll be very exciting. Yes.
I'd like to once again congratulate our winner of the week, which is KJ, aka Good Nick for some reason. You can find more of our content wherever you listen to podcasts, on our YouTube channel, Twitter at Talking Studios, and our website, talkingpicturestrivia.com. We're extremely grateful to all those who subscribe, like, follow, and leave a review. Have you ever impersonated someone for an extended period of time? Let us know on Twitter, talkingpicturestrivia@gmail.com, or give us a call at 201-467-8679.
You could find me on Twitter at ThomasLehman15. Also, check out Talking Pictures Trivia B-Side, our sister podcast, in which we investigate these movies in a little more detail. And this one, I'll just read my notes out loud. That could be the dreadfully boring B-Side, including the exchanges between me and Counterfeit Nick.
That's me, by the way.
I like the part of the notes where KJ mentioned, I think you know where I'm going with this, and nobody will know where you're going.
Audience, stay tuned. See if you know where Tom's going with this.
Do you know? Let us know.
And you can find me on Twitter at KJ10001000.
I can also be found on Twitter at The Nicknamed. Join us next time when we discuss Nick's recommendation, which is my recommendation from 2021, The Matrix Resurrections. Pretty sure this is going to be a first watch for everyone, as it is just coming out right before we go over it on our next episode.
Ding, 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 ding.
Bong.
Let's
All
do
right,
it.
here we go with the questions.
Let's do it. Neo.
Morpheus. That should have been our words. One word to describe this movie.
I could be Trinity.
That would kind of work, actually.
Yeah, I have the hair for it.
No.
You guys are gonna get this so easy. Who
What
was
was Leonardo da Vinci's dog's name?
the